So today we're going to talk about how we strengthen and build trust with our teams. And huge thanks to you all for giving up your lunchtime to join me for today's session. I really appreciate it. I will keep an eye on the waiting room to let other people in as they join us. But you want to talk about this kind of principle of leadership, really, around trust. And there's some nuances to our session today that hopefully you'll find useful and perhaps give you a different perspective on how you do this for your business teams and how you kind of make this, I guess, integral to the way that you lead your businesses and teams that you're working with. And really, I want to provide you with a space this lunchtime just to kind of get some thinking space, start to think about what you're doing today, what's worked up until now, what you might consider changing going forward, and how that could kind of help you and the organization with growth. Because I'll show you the links as we go through today with, the trust in your team and cultivating that trust and how that improves engagement, performance, results, and growth. It's quite an obvious connection between those different elements of a business, but one that's often overlooked. We don't often focus on kind of trust as a way to inspire and encourage growth. So we'll look at that today. So I'm going to talk about three things. We'll look at why building trust with your teams is so important. What's the kind of evidence behind it? We'll then look at these key responsibilities of leadership. So as well as trust, as we're leading our organizations, what else should we be focusing in on that's really important for us to build and inspire our teams and grow our businesses? And then we'll look at some principles for improving engagement, motivation, and performance that are all linked to trust as well. So hopefully some practical ideas that will really help you in your businesses that you can take away and implement from today or this afternoon if possible. So that's the idea of today's session. I think I know a lot of you, and obviously we're connected. That's how you've kind of come to be at this event. But just as a bit of background, my experience is kind of as originally in like a laboratory technician as I first started my career. Then I went into sales. Then I went into sales management. Then into more broader business management and general management. And I've led lots of different organizations and teams. Not just sales teams, but technical teams, marketing teams, and more general business administration teams. And what I found over the years is that through leading those organizations, leading those teams, it's really easy after a period of time for people to kind of get a little bit despondent and disconnected from their roles, and negativity creeps in, inconsistencies creep in. And it's why I think a lot of people look to programs, coaches, mentors, leadership development, we'll talk about that today, to help their teams to kind of move to re-energizing, getting back to high performance, looking at the principles of growth and the results, and really focusing in on results. And that's kind of what we try and do. And hopefully you'll start to get some of those insights today that you can take away and start to implement in your organization. And along the way, I've written a couple of books. So I've written a book on sales. And this year, more recently, I've written a book called Coaching Leaders, which specifically looks at how you move to a more coaching style of leadership. And it's based on the work I do with clients, but also the years of experience I have managing different businesses and teams. So if you're interested, I would definitely recommend it. You can get it on Amazon. It's a great read. Feedback so far is superb. So do feel free to check that out. I've got a poll for today. There's not that many of us on the call, but I will still run the poll because it's interesting. I'd love to hear from you about your current situation with leadership development. So I'll just put that poll up on your screen. You should be able to just click one of the three answers. It's either yes, no, or if there's something else, then just put other and drop that in the comments or the chat for me if you wouldn't mind. I'm just interested in whether you've had structured leadership development, especially if you're, if you've been in leadership for a while, or maybe you're new to leadership. But I'd love to hear what your kind of experience so far is. Brilliant. Thank you for taking that poll. Believe it or not, we've got a 50-50 split today. So 50% of you yes, 50% of you are no. So that's interesting. So you got that. That's pretty representative, actually, of the market. So thank you for filling out that poll. And it'll be interesting. I'll kind of come to the chat as well. The chat, you'll notice on Zoom, if you're used to Zoom meetings, on the bottom of the toolbar, there's a chat box. As we're going through today, if you want to drop questions or comments or feedback in there, please feel free to do so. And I'll pick that up and make sure that we cover any of your points as we go through today's session. So 50-50, that's actually slightly better than average. If you look at the evidence, there's lots of studies. This one by this company, Digits Management Research Study, showed that 61% of managers are promoted and then receive no training. So only 39% of managers get training. And then once they've had training, of that cohort, so of that 39%, only 65% of that cohort then receive ongoing management or leadership training. And what that creates really is a gap in organizations, a gap in capability, but also a gap in confidence and skills to lead teams. And a lot of what the work we do is really try and help re-establish some of that best practice around leadership and what it takes to lead a successful business team and do the work that we know is important. And today we'll focus really zero in on trust and where that fits. But there's a lot of evidence around leadership and where trust kind of fits with it. And I'll just share that with you as context for today's session. ADP Research did a huge study, something crazy like 38,000 organizations they researched. And what they found was that through their research, if you look at trust, when teams trust their leader or manager, then there was a direct correlation between high trust and employee engagement, to the point where they found that versus those employees that said, yes, I trust my leader versus those that said, no, I don't, the engagement level was 12 times the level for those people who did trust the leader. So it's really important. This is not just about whether or not you got trust in your team. It's about engagement of your organization and people working with you. And then DDI did a kind of separate piece of research that said those employees who are highly engaged, so we know that engagement is very strongly linked to trust in the leader. Those employees that are highly engaged are 4 times less likely to leave an employer in the business when they've got higher engagement. So 4 times less likely to leave. So in terms of retention of organizational staff and our teams, actually trust and engagement is a huge indicator of loyalty and staff retention. And we also found Aon did a big research study, another one that talked about the direct correlation between employee engagement and then customer and client satisfaction. And I mean, that's no surprise to us, but it's interesting. It was 4 times the number. So the higher the engagement, the higher the levels of customer and client satisfaction. And we can all relate to that, right? If you've worked in a business where you have really engaged and energized employees, they tend to look after your customers and clients much better. And I think it was Richard Branson who said, train your employees so well that they could leave, treat them so well that they don't want to. And it's a big part of trust and engagement is the way that we as leaders talk to our teams, engage them and support them. And then if you look at highly engaged employees, actually then there's a direct link to revenue. So those companies, Hay Group did a study that showed that those companies with highly engaged employees generate 2.5 times higher revenues than those companies with low employee engagement scores. So this is so important that we get this right. And it all, of course, links back to us as leaders and trust that we build with our teams. And then the final piece of information that kind of joins up the dots, and it's why leadership connects with it. Fortune did this study that shows leaders who have development and focus on coaching, so coaching their teams, not directing, micromanaging, pushing, cajoling, they increased adoption of change and the performance of those teams by 3.5 times. So all of a sudden you start to see all of these different initiatives that we put into a business start to stack. So we build trust with our teams, it increases engagement, we increase engagement, and that improves retention. We improve retention, we also improve client satisfaction. We then start to see higher productivity, increased revenue and performance, and then we start to see teams more open to change, more willing to change, and performing at a higher level and evolving over time. So there's lots of reasons why we do this. And partly, as I said before, partly it's good for us to learn these principles, but there's real data, there's really hard data here that shows us there's a material impact on our businesses. And there's something I talk about in the work that I do with clients that I thought I'd share today that's really useful in terms of high performance. Because really, we talk about trust, we talk about teams. What we want to do is have a team that's fully engaged, committed, and performs at the highest level possible. That's what drives, the results in our businesses ultimately. And the foundations for high performance are quite interesting. The first is about psychology and mindset. And I don't think anybody on this call was with us last week, but last week I ran a session on mindset and a growth mindset. If you'd like to catch up on that session, drop me a note and I'll happily share a link to it. But helping our teams to foster a mindset for growth, think about where they fit in the bigger business and give them confidence that they can perform is really important. It's the first enabler, like foundation of high performance. And once the psychology and mindset is being developed and cultivated, then it's about helping our teams to develop the right skills. And sometimes that's functional skills, sometimes it's communication skills, sometimes it's about focus and performance related skills. But psychology first, then we start to help our teams develop the right skill sets in our business. And then finally, we have to systemize. We have to give people a way that they can reproduce results, continue to kind of accelerate their performance through following a structured system. Sometimes that's in the form of a checklist. Sometimes it's a piece of tech that we use to help them support and guide their actions. But we really want to try and systemize wherever possible, systemize, operationalize, and help our teams to follow a process. But we have to have all three of these levels interacting in order for our teams to hit that next level of performance. And I'm sure you can relate to this in your own business. If any one of these three is missing, people are misfiring. So we have to really hone in on these three. And I remember leading a business team many years ago when I hadn't realized the importance of psychology and was really focused on skill development and structure and systems. And I had a couple of people that just couldn't quite connect the dots. We couldn't quite get them performing. And actually, when I worked more closely with them and started to try and coach them, I found out that actually was a lack of self-belief. They were their own problem. They were getting in the way. And when we started to unpack that, explore it, give them some space to start to think about their achievements, really focus in on what they were doing well, start to encourage and support them, and they started to believe they were capable of more, their performance soared. But if I hadn't gone back to that foundation of psychology, if I hadn't worked through that, we probably would have just kept seeing that misfiring, spotty performance up and down. Sometimes you have to go back a couple of steps to go forward, 4 or 5. And I'm sure you recognize that in your businesses as well. So that's high performance. I'm interested in your own experiences here, actually. I'd love to hear in your chat, in our chat, what are the key leadership challenges you're dealing with right now? What are you working on that would be useful? And the idea here is that I'll incorporate this, try and address them either in our Q&A or as we go through today's session. So if you wouldn't mind, just on the chat, so in the toolbar, the middle button is the chat. I'll just get it going by saying, here's the chat. So just in there, what are the leadership challenges or the business challenges that you're dealing with right now? What's a priority for you right now? And I'll try as we go through the rest of today's session to really hone in on what you're facing so that we can kind of get that relevance for you. Ravinda, thank you for the message. So challenge with working out optimal like dentist to nurse ratios. So how many of those should you be having? Okay, thanks, Ravinda. I'll see if we can talk to that as we go through today, and I'll also maybe if we can't get to that specifically today, this is about resourcing in your practice. Then we'll look at. I'm happy to have a conversation with you offline if we don't get you a sufficient answer this afternoon. But thanks for sharing that, Ravinda. That's really useful, and not an easy challenge to make. But we'll see if we can help. Kate, thank you, Kate. Keeping the team motivated and trying to get people to work uniformly. Okay, that's interesting. Thanks, Kate. Yeah, keeping people motivated. We can definitely look at how we do that today, and then trying to get people work uniformly, consistently across your teams. Okay, thanks, Kate. That's great. We'll see if we can help you with that today as well. Brilliant. Thank you. Anybody else? Just drop your key challenges as well. I'll keep an eye on the chat and I'll read them out as they come up. But we'll look to try and incorporate those two as we go through today. Okay, thank you, Kate. Thanks, Ravinda. So we really want to focus in on kind of trust and leadership, and Ravinda, thank you. I'll just come back to that. Trying to get the team to try new challenges and enhance their skills. Okay, thank you, Ravinda. That's great. If you, I'll also send you today, Ravinda, the link to our growth mindset session from last week, because that will also answer some of those questions about trying new challenges and enhancing skills. That was we will get to it today as well, but there's a foundation from last week that will be useful for you. So we really want to start to think about leadership and what we can do to start to inspire our teams, inspire higher levels of performance. But in a way, we have to step almost to one side and think actually our job is to build trust first, because it's interesting if you think about where trust fits in running your business. If your teams don't trust you and you don't have high levels of trust as leaders or as a management team in your business, then you're even if you're trying to do something positive, even if you're trying to push through a positive change, you're trying to help and support your teams. If you don't have that level of trust, people will even reject positive feedback and positive change. It's really fascinating. And oftentimes that's not even something people do consciously. It's something that happens as a byproduct of them just not feeling as if they have that trust in place. And some of you may have already some of you may be aware of this principle from Maslow, Abraham Maslow, who was a psychologist from kind of early in the 19th century, talked about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and it's still today referenced as the kind of go-to model to think about how we engage and motivate people. I just want to go through it because it's really useful. The first area is physiological needs, our needs, the needs that we need to have satisfied literally for survival. And what we find is that if anybody has that threatened, so if anybody's got serious financial issues, or they've got some illness or some health scare, or they've got a family member that's in dire need, because it's so fundamental, it's a physiological need for them. They want to know that need is met. That can actually derail all sorts of performance. So understanding that is the kind of foundational for people to even be able to kind of engage in their work is really important. And once physiological needs are met, once that stability is in place, then it's about safety needs. So like personal safety, having a job that they enjoy, having resources at their disposal, having their health, having a property, a roof over their heads. So we go psychological needs, then safety needs next. And this all makes sense intellectually, but actually we can see this play out in real time in our businesses if any of these needs are at risk or unbalanced. And once those base layer, those foundational needs are met, then people start to think about connection, relationships, and it says love and belonging, and that's important on a personal context. In a business context, it's about positive relationships. It's about having people that you like, and of course that you trust, and those connections are really important. And it's only when those three layers are met that people can then start to think about their own self-esteem, their own self-confidence, their own capability and performance at another level. And this is why very often, I talked about mindset. It's why very often if we find that people aren't delivering on, what we believe their true potential is, very often if you start to look at what's really going on beyond just their role, you'll start to see there are some building blocks missing. And if you don't go back and sort those out, then they just won't ever get to these next levels of performance and potential. And then beyond that, esteem needs are kind of performance-based. Then if we start to think about what it takes to get to the next level beyond that, then you've got what they call in the Maslow hierarchy, self-actualization needs. This is about not just wanting to do a good job, but wanting to be the absolute very best that you can be. And when you get someone at this level, it's a real pleasure to lead and manage them, because you can start to help them see even greater opportunities for their development, even higher potential within your organization, practice, business. And it really does help you and them to kind of get to that next level. But interestingly, this was the original hierarchy of needs that Maslow mapped out. He went back and revisited it and added a top layer. And that top layer was what he called self-transcendence of needs, which is a desire to not just be the best you can be, but actually find meaning beyond yourself, start to contribute to something bigger, become part of a cause or a community or a movement that actually makes a real impact in the world. And as you can see, you can't really get there if you haven't got these other base needs established. And this, in terms of building trust with our teams, recognizing this and starting to have conversations that are much more tailored to where your people are right now is really important, because you won't establish trust and you won't get people to that next level of performance without understanding where they are today. And the thing is, I talked about trust. Trust sits here under kind of connection, belonging, having that trust with the relationship with somebody else. But if somebody has, anything at risk, it's very easy for them to start to slip down that hierarchy. So if they start to feel threatened, or they start to feel that their needs aren't being met, it's very easy for trust to drop right down. And so we might have to take a step back and go to meet that person where they are in their current position around trust, in order to meet their needs and re-establish it. And then, of course, we can start to climb up the pyramid and the hierarchy of needs. And I talked about, so that's kind of thinking about your teams. Then we think about you as a leader. And we think about, what is it that as leaders of businesses, what do we need to consider as key responsibilities? And these are 5 key responsibilities of leadership that are really useful to think about context around how you lead your teams. And the first kind of key responsibility is about what we call psychological safety. And I'm sure you've heard this term, but psychological safety is really important, because what it means is that people feel safe to express their ideas. They feel safe to ask questions. They feel safe to maybe explain if something isn't right. They feel safe to challenge. And if anybody starts to have that psychological safety undermined, the response is that they withdraw. And I've seen this in business teams that I've led, where perhaps there's something going on in the team that we're not fully aware of, and you start to see a member of the team, or maybe a couple of members of the team, start to withdraw, and it's because they don't feel psychologically safe. And the way the mind works is fascinating. Even when somebody is physically safe, there's no harm can come to them, no physical harm. Actually, that psychological harm, or that psychological fear, can be debilitating, where people will literally, withdraw, not make contributions, and start, and you might see their performance drift. So our job as leaders is to create that psychological safety, so that our teams can express to us what's really on their mind. They can do it with complete certainty that they won't be ridiculed, they won't be undermined, they won't be argued with, and it doesn't mean you can't have debates and challenges within your teams, but we have to do it from a place where everybody feels as if their contribution is valid, and they feel confident to make it. That's the kind of first layer of responsibilities as a leader. Once we have incorporated psychological safety, and this might be something we have to revisit with key team members, depending on who you're leading and what their situation is, then it is about the core of today's session. How do we build a relationship of trust, so that people trust us and we trust them? It's a two-way street, trust. It can't be, can't be unilateral. It has to be bilateral. We have to trust people. They have to trust us. And I always have this kind of default on trust, that I give trust to people and it's theirs to break. So in my opinion, we trust people until they maybe give us reasons to doubt that trust, but otherwise we should extend trust in the first instance. And the great thing about that is that it fosters that reciprocation of trust from people straight away. We'll talk about how we do that in the next part of our webinar. And then once we've got trust in place, if people feel safe to talk to us, express their needs, challenge where necessary, question, be open about what's really going on, then we build trust. And we'll talk about some of the deposits that we can make to build trust, some of the ways in which we can do it tactically. And then thirdly, it's about helping everybody in our team be clear on what's expected of them. What does good performance look like in their position? And then start to give them some goals to deliver on as part of value to the business. So this is what your role and expectations are in your role, and here are the goals that, when you achieve them, mean you're delivering a level of performance. And having that as an ongoing conversation with your team, so they feel clear, right, I'm clear on what Justin's expecting of me, is really valuable because it's a huge engagement indicator. It's a huge motivator for people. Most, if not all people come to work to do a good job. And actually, we need to help them to be clear on what a good job is. And that's really important for them and for us. It makes leadership much easier if you take some time to be clear with your teams individually. What does doing great work look like for our business? And then fourth, our job as leaders, and this is something that we're often overlook. Once these three layers are in place, then it's about building the right positive energy. It's about helping our teams to stay motivated. It's about helping them to maintain their own levels of engagement. So it's not for us to engage them, it's for them to engage themselves, but us to create the environment where they can do that really effectively. And so energy, positivity, motivation, and engagement. Once you've got these first three layers in place, it's actually quite straightforward to do it, but you have to have those first three layers in place first. And that energy, motivation, engagement is all about unlocking then the next levels of performance from people so they feel like they want to deliver at the highest level possible. And then finally, what we want to focus on then is to think beyond just the tactical performance day to day and start to help our teams think about their own growth, about their own development, and how they start to push forward to become, for those people who are in roles that are fairly stable within the business, how do we help them see, what does the best in class look like? What does best in class performance look like? How do you start to improve towards that? For those people who have potential in our organization, we think that's someone who could be, managing a small team or starting to step up to greater responsibilities, then start to develop them and help them see a growth plan to start to build their position in the future within our teams. And that's it's a really nice way to start to think about these 5 key responsibilities, and they are in order. So we should address them and try and build on them in this order of psychological safety, trust, clarity, energy, and then growth. And if you can start to think about this in your own teams, it will really start to help you get clearer on how you can support them, and it will help them to really start to engage at a higher level. So I'd love to think from your perspective, have a think about which of these, for different people in your teams, it might be different in terms of these 5 layers, but which of these is your highest priority, I wonder? I'd love to hear, so just in the chat, which of those is your highest priority? And based on what we've covered so far, believe it or not, we're about halfway through, and we will finish before 2 p.m, by the way. But I'd love to hear which of these is your highest priority. What do you think and what are your key actions so far? Thanks, Ravinder. Number 3, let's get that clarity of expectations and goals. Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And that is, it's interesting because thank you, Ravinder, for that comment. Number 3, around clarity of expectations and goals. When we look back to the challenge that you're facing, Ravinder, around trying to get the team to try new challenges and enhance their skills, partly that is about being clear on what's expected, right? One of the expectations that you and your team have of each other is that they should be, looking at new challenges, trying to encourage each other to embrace them, to enhance their skills and think about growth and development. So it kind of links to, how clearly are we laying down and agreeing those expectations of our teams. Thank you, Ravinder. And Kate, number 4, let me go back, energy, motivation, engagement. Thank you, Kate. Yeah, absolutely. If those first 3 principles and layers are in place, then actually kind of getting intentional about the right energy, the right engagement, the right motivation for teams can be hugely empowering and start to give you a real shift in performance of your teams. Thank you, Kate. Thanks, Ravinder. That's great. And I'm just thinking about, actually, that links really nicely, Kate, to your point, which was keeping the team motivated, trying to get the team to work uniformly. I would say, if you go back, Kate, to that kind of look at those 5 levels, think about team working uniformly. Number 3, that clarity of expectations, clarity of goals, having those individual conversations with people, and then linking that to the energy, the motivation, engagement, that should give you a real opportunity to start to move your teams towards that consistency and uniformity of delivery. But it's a combination of one-to-one conversations and team conversations. Very good. Thanks, Ravinda. Thanks, Kate. Appreciate that. Appreciate your input. Okay, so let's talk about trust. So specifically, when we pull out that line, how do we build trust? There's this great principle from the book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. And I don't know if anybody's read it, but it's an interesting book. It's quite a heavy read, actually. But he talks about the 7 habits of highly effective people. And within that, he also talks about this principle that he calls the emotional bank account. And you might have heard this before, but what Stephen Covey lays out in the emotional bank account is to think about the relationships with our team or with clients or patients or customers as bank accounts. So we think about the interaction between us and them and that relationship as bank accounts. And the recommendation is, and it's an obvious one, that we should make regular deposits in that emotional bank account with key people for whom our relationship is important, right? And those deposits might be, praise, recognition, thanks, appreciation, gratitude. It might just be spending some time with people. It might be following through on your commitments. It might be doing the things that we say we're going to do. It's about making sure that relationship and the things you do for that person are consistent, and that starts to build and incrementally increase trust. And Stephen Covey goes on to talk about the flip side of that, which is withdrawals from those bank accounts. We don't always realize we're making them, but sometimes we might need someone to change their plans for us, make a last minute change. We might need them to do something urgent. We might need to give them some critical feedback. We might inadvertently overlook them. We might not respond to something they've asked us to do without, again, because we're busy and there's stuff always going on for us in our businesses. And each of those actions is a withdrawal from the account. And what we should be aware of is that if we don't have sufficient credit in an account with somebody and we start to make withdrawals and we go overdrawn, then we start to put trust at risk with people. And the idea is that if we do become overdrawn, we should think about, okay, what reinvestments do I need to make into this bank account? How do I do that as soon as possible so that I haven't created such a gulf in the account that it starts to affect the relationship? And really what we want to do is maintain a healthy, positive credit in all those accounts with key people in our network and our teams that are important to us. And one of the ways just to sense check it is to ask yourself this question, and your instinct, your intuition will tell you. If you just ask, am I in credit or debt with this person in my team, you will instinctively know. You'll know the answer. And really what we then need to think about is, okay, what can I do to improve my account balance? It says increase, I would say improve. Because you'll know for each person, it might not just be about increasing. Sometimes there's something you can do that increases, that improves that account balance. And I like to think, Stephen Covey doesn't say this, but I like to think of it as not as a savings account, but as a current account. Because very often, the transactional nature of our relationships mean that sometimes we'll do some things that really work and deposit in accounts. But people can forget quite easily. So even though we might have long-standing relationships, actually, we will very often have to make those frequent, regular deposits in the account to make sure that people are aware of the work that we're doing. And at the same time, because it's a current account, sometimes we might want to make requests on people. If we've made a lot of investments and deposits in the relationships, we're treating people really well, we're doing all great work, sometimes we might have to ask for something in exchange and push people, challenge them a little harder. But that only comes as a result of having that credit in the bank account in the first place. So we have to make sure the relationship's equitable and managed. And of course, the reason we do this, why do we do this? Because what this gives us as leaders in our businesses is we earn the right to start to manage people more effectively, lead people more effectively, to challenge them when we need to give them direct feedback when we need to make requests on them, and ultimately to hold them accountable to perform at their level that is right for them and right for our business. That has to be a consideration on their part and ours. And of course, in terms of leadership, it gives us permission and makes us feel as if we can lead our teams. So being a leader is very often linked to how much trust we've develop with our teams. It gives us, we earn the right to do it. And that's so important for us to get into our kind of thinking around this. And then just to kind of build on that, and I'll send you these slides after today's session if they're useful. So we also talk about, you've got this, emotional bank account with people. We also think about what are the other key elements that really build trust in a relationship. And there's lots of things that build trust, and i.e. deposits in our relationship, in our bank account. And then there are things that break trust or erode trust. And of course, they're withdrawals. And I won't go through all of these, but there are a few on there that aren't as obvious as we might think. The big thing about building trust is listening to people, giving them space, and really being interested in them. But if you had the same experience as me, if you have worked for a manager or a leader that doesn't listen, that blocks things out, that is always in a rush, that's always got something else on their mind, and when you're talking to them, they're not really listening. It's a huge erosion of trust. And sometimes we have to wake up to ourselves and think, actually, am I doing that? The other is, listening and being interested versus always just having our agenda and just talking to people. I need you to do this, I need you to do that. Being overly directive. We do have to help people to be clear on expectations and delivering the role, but there are times when we can do that and still be interested in them. And that really does create and foster stronger trust than if we're just talking about ourselves and the business too much. The other thing about trust building is coaching people rather than being too directive. We can and should, as we talked about before, set out expectations and goals, but we shouldn't necessarily be, just too directive around what our expectations are. Actually, setting people clear goals and then coaching them to achieve those goals is much more effective in terms of their engagement and our ability to kind of keep them performing, motivated, and to maintain the trust in the relationship. And then another thing, I'll just point out one more, and that is actually building trust. If we positively challenge people, with the right relationship in place, having provided them with support, if we positively challenge people to say, I think you're capable of more than this, and I think if you were able to do X, Y, and Z, that your performance is going to go to the next level. To be able to have those conversations with people actually strengthens trust, and it doesn't undermine it, versus being too agreeable with people when we should be challenging them. And that's a really useful distinction. It's something that I've learned through years of leading teams. And it took me a little while to realize the importance of it, but it can be really positive for your relationships if you can get to this point where you're positively challenging people rather than just being too agreeable or avoiding issues. It's really important that we do that as a leader, not just for that individual, but it's important for the team to be aware that we do that as well, because that strengthens trust right the way across our teams, not just in those one-to-one individual relationships. And so I've talked through the 5 responsibilities of leadership and trust in a bit more detail. We've got this toolkit that we use in Focus for Growth that's a series of different documents that helps you start to build a plan around how you make some tangible improvements in this area. And I will, if you would like a copy, I'll send you this document from the toolkit, which is called our team review document. And you'll see here that I've kind of got an example and I've got a blank template. So you get the 2 copies of the tool, but it allows you to just kind of map out who's in your team. And then on a scale of 1 to 10, just start to kind of document where you think people are. So when it comes to psychological safety, where are your teams on a scale of 1 to 10? 1 being, it's poor, 10 being it's outstanding. And then you can do the same for trust. And then you can do the same for clarity of goals and expectations. And you can do the same for energy, motivation, and engagement, i.e., how much you and they are energized and motivated to work together and for them to deliver. Then you can do the same for growth and development, which is often an area that people find is the biggest challenge, actually, because it's finding that time, it's ring fencing that time in a business for your teams to grow and develop. And actually, just while we're talking about it, one of the things that's really useful to hold in mind is that really what makes our businesses stronger is our people getting better. So we talk about systems, we talk about investments in the business, absolutely. But the better our people get, the stronger our business gets. And that's really important. Growth and development is what drives that. So just a reminder to ourselves to think, actually, we should be really focusing in on helping our teams identify those areas for development and supporting them to grow to reach their highest potential. And then finally on here is the emotional bank account. So actually, where are we in the emotional bank account in terms of, have I got enough deposited, or have I perhaps deposited too much? Sometimes we think, I've done a lot for my team, I'm not actually asking enough of them. Sometimes that can be an area that we want to focus on. But this document allows you just to capture your thoughts, a ranking for each person, and then to think, actually, based on those scores, what are the actions I need to take for each of those people? And it will be slightly different for each member of your team, and the action will be slightly different as well. You can see on this example here where somebody where trust is low for the first person. So you think, right, okay, I'm going to book monthly one-to-ones. I'm going to get to know this person and agree goals. And you see the growth and development is at a 5. So define success and create a personal development plan. All of that is going to sit with the team member, right? But it's just our job as a leader is to sit down with them, have that conversation, create the awareness of the opportunity for growth and improvement, and then the team member picks it up as an action. On the second one here, you can see psychological safety is lower. So is growth and development. So you'd say, okay, well, on this one, I book a one-to-one, reassure this person, reassure them that their position's safe, reassure them that they're contributing at a great level, and we think a lot of them. Check their goals and just make sure that they're okay, and ask what motivates that person and incorporate that into their development plan. So you start to map out a series of actions that just a really simple way of building trust, starting to get greater clarity and managing your teams really effectively in these 5 key areas that we know are important for leadership and, of course, performance of our teams. So I'll send that through to you as a document after today's session. And there's the example document in there, and then there's this blank one, so you can use that for your own teams. Okay, so we've covered a lot so far, haven't we? We're going to wrap up in the next 10 minutes or so, but before we do, I'd love, Ravinder, great question. Is the action plan a joint exercise with your staff? So Ravinder, you absolutely can do it as a joint exercise with your staff, yes. I would say before you do it, just familiarise yourself with it and make sure that you're clear on where you think they are, and then you can start to have those conversations. What you might want to do is do it as a one-to-one. So rather than do it as a team, do it as a one-to-one first. And as you start to have those one-to-one conversations and you fill out the template, you might then start to feel confident to do it as a team discussion. But I'd start with you scoring first, then one-to-one conversation with your team to use it and calibrate, and then you can start to, if you feel confident, to open it up to a team discussion. So thanks, Ravinder. Hopefully that's answered that question. So I'd love to hear. We've kind of moved through the session today. Thank you, everybody, for your feedback so far and engagement. What are your key actions now? So we're kind of coming towards the end of the session. What are your key actions now? I'm going to be sending you the slides from today. So if you want to share them with anybody, you can. I'll be sending you a link to today's recording. So again, if you wanted to pass that on to members of your team, you feel free to do that. You are very welcome to do that. And I'll send you that document from the previous couple of slides, the team review document as well. So I'd love to hear kind of updated, just drop into the chat, updated actions. What are you thinking now in terms of your key actions with your teams? Because here's the thing, right? It's great that we're on a webinar together. I love being here with you. But the real impact happens when what we've talked about today translates into kind of something you can do to put in place in your business or your practice so that it's going to make an impact for you. So I'd love to hear that. What are you thinking now in terms of key actions and your next steps? While you're doing that, just while you're typing away, I'm sure you're furiously tapping away in the background. While you're doing that, I'm going to just cover a couple other things. So please feel free to drop those messages, drop your actions into the chat. A couple of things. One is there's this model that we use for communication. We use it for communication, sales, and presenting. If you're finding yourselves in those situations where you have to really think about effective communication, whether that be with your customers, patients, or teams, this is a really nice model. Some of you may have seen it before. It's called the Inspire model, and it's a way to really help you communicate more effectively. It's from the book Inspire, Influence, Sell, which is for kind of the sales professionals. There is a book for dentists, which is the Inspire, Consult, Sell book. So that's kind of dentists and medical profession. Similar model, but just kind of different context. It's really useful. I won't go through the model, but do, if you haven't read either of these books and you'd like to, I promise you they are a really, really practical way to start to communicate more effectively. Ravinda, thank you. I'm going to try the action plan to appraise my staff. Brilliant. I think that's a fabulous starting point. Use that as a way to kind of almost calibrate where you are with your teams. Thank you, Ravinda. That's great. And then we've got this coach leadership model, which, so the previous, I'm just going to go back a second. The Inspire model is about communication, engagement, and influence. And then the coach model is specifically about leadership. So if you're leading a business, leading a team, and you want to start to take a more coaching-led approach, you don't want to feel as if you're constantly having to give people direction. And that's the position a lot of leaders find themselves in. I've found myself in that situation many a time. If you're picking up too much responsibility, if you're always having to remind people of things and you think, why am I going through this again? Then the antidote to that is coaching, starting to coach your teams. And interestingly, the skills that make you a good leader and coach aren't the same skills that made you got you into leadership, that were your high performance skills, right? It's the reason you got to become a leader or a manager is because you were really good at what you did and you're like, right, I need to do this for myself. And then there's this transition that we need to make into how do we pivot to become a leader. It's not an easy thing to do, but there is a formula for doing it, right? And there are lots of formulas, but this is a really well tried and tested formula. It's called the coach model. And happy to talk to anybody about this offline if you think if it's useful. But it's also in the book Coaching Leaders. So there's a couple of books, and these really are specialties around what I've done in the past, what we do with clients, and we run programs that really unlock the next level. So communication and sales, and then coaching as a leadership style. So feel free to pick those up. They're both available on Amazon. Okay, so think about today's session. We will wrap up now. Enthusiasm. So we've had a great conversation. We've had an hour together almost. There's lots of things on your mind. As you go back into work this afternoon, your enthusiasm for this stuff's going to wane. It's going to drop. So before you do that, make a commitment to yourself now. Decide what is it you're going to do. And my advice is schedule some time to do it. So just open up your diary now, schedule some time to action what we've talked about today, or what you'd like to work on following today's session. And you'll be surprised that that single tangible thing that you do for yourself will just make that commitment, give you that energy to keep the enthusiasm alive after today's session. If you would like to talk about something specific for your business, I would love to offer you a complimentary strategy session. So I do this quite a lot with people, have one-to-one sessions. And what people find, I'm just going to drop that in the chats actually, because it'll be easier for you to see it now. So what people find, and what I find, I mean, I work with a coach. I've worked with a coach for years, and I always find the same. When you talk about your specific business, your situation to somebody external that's got a lot of experience, you always get a new level of clarity. And so I've just put in the chat the 45-minute strategy session link. It should, let me just show you what that looks like. It should look like that. So when you click it, so feel free to click it now and just road test it. It should look like that. When you click it, you'll see that, for example, it goes straight to tomorrow. So tomorrow morning, there's a couple of sessions, 10 a.m. Right there through to 11, and then one in the afternoon at 2. So that's my availability tomorrow. You see, you can forward to next week, and you can start to see afternoon next Monday, morning of next Tuesday. So you can start to see my availability. And what that allows you to do is just a 45-minute strategy session specifically to talk about your business, what it is you're looking to do, and how we run these strategy sessions. It's really simple, but it's a really effective formula, actually. So part one is, where are you now? What's happening? And then within part one is where would you like to be in 12 months? So that's where you are now. Where do you want to get to in 12 months? If you want to think longer term, that you can. And then part two is, again, what do you think you need to do? What development do you need to make in yourself that's going to get you there? And sometimes that might be a few things you do yourself, right? And then part three is there a way that we can help? And if the answer to that is it's not right for now, no problem. But it just, these first two parts really help you to get this clarity on where you're headed and what you're looking to achieve. So I'd love if you're on the chat, just click on the link so that you can see it and get started. If you want to book in with me, then feel free to do so. I'm a bit strange. I really like these growth conversations. I like a challenging conversation about people's businesses. I've done a lot of work on coaching and development over the years, and it's surprising how you can come up with a few simple answers and a few simple changes and switches that really help you to make the improvements in your business. So if anybody would like to take me up on that offer, then just click on the link, get yourself scheduled in, and I'll look forward to catching up with you. So we are at 7 minutes to the hour. I'm going to open up the call now for questions and just say thanks to everybody for being with me so far. If you would like to just drop a question in the chat, I'll happily take and answer any questions that you have. I'm just going to give you a moment in case anybody is dropping a question in the chat, and then we'll wrap up just before the hour. So questions. I'm going to go back to one around working out optimal kind of dentist nurse rate. That looks interesting, Ravinder. I probably have to know a little bit more about your current commitments and what capacity is, how many patients you're seeing, and how many dentists we're talking about. But that as a coach, that's a great coaching conversation actually. So I guess the thing to work out is how utilized each of your dentists is, and then how utilized each of the nurses are, and whether or not you could then be allocating resource based on that utilization. So that would be my starting point. And if everybody's flat out from the start of the day to the end, then it might be a different situation. But if it's not, then we can talk about that. Ravinder, brilliant. He's going to book a strategy session to go over it. Perfect. Thanks, Ravinder. I look forward to meeting you. Okay, everybody, thank you so much for joining me today, and thanks for staying on till the end. I really appreciate it. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks for the engagement in the polls and the questions. If you'd like to connect with me, then feel free to do that. I'm on all the channels: LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. But otherwise, if you'd like to book a strategy session, please feel free. And I look forward to meeting you one-to-one. Have a wonderful afternoon, everybody, and I will look forward to seeing you soon. Final thing, I will be running, because I've had a few requests on different topics, I'm going to be running one of these sessions each week. So I'm aiming for Thursday lunchtime. So this will probably become a regular thing. So I'll be in touch with you. And if you'd like to join us, then maybe I'll see you next Thursday as well. So have a wonderful rest of the week, everybody. Good to see you. Thanks again, and catch up with you soon.